the art world is tapping into, in my view, the spiritual world. And artists are inspired. When we talk about artists being inspired, a lot of times that inspiration comes from the spiritual realm. That's been my theory, my thesis forever. And so they might not be cognizant of, quote, predicting the future, but there is a kind of a prophetic spirit going on. And we can see that very clearly, for example, in Dostoevsky. We've detailed in many podcasts, especially with Mark Hackard and Tristan, cases where Dostoevsky was very prescient in his fiction and predicting mass chaos through socialism, right? We think about The Possessed or Demons, where you have the characters predicting 60 million skulls to bring in world socialism. You have the Grand Inquisitor chapter in Brothers Karamazov, where Dostoevsky's characters are predicting the socialism world salvation turn that the Vatican will take to becoming essentially against Christ, antichrist, but offering people a world socialist, anti-war, pacifist, de-armament future. And that's exactly what we read a couple nights ago in the Gaudium et Spes Vatican II documents, where they actually, and I didn't even realize paragraph 66 actually encourages chain migration. So it's even worse than I even knew, because I was looking at some of the highlight sections, but there's other sections that I didn't even get to or wasn't even aware of. So Vatican II's Gaudium et Spes is a powerful fulfillment, Pacamenteros of John the 23rd as well, of what Dostoevsky's Grand Inquisitor chapters predicted, 80, 70, 80, 90 years earlier, or The Possessed, right? That world socialism would lead to these sorts of scenarios. And far from something like Fatima, vindicating the Vatican or something like that, rather, Dostoevsky is more powerful and more predictive than these goofy Fatima predictions, because the Vatican itself is the one that adopted world socialist, Fabian socialist principles in the Gaudium et Spes documents on record. Now, we're going to look and see further evidence of why that's the case and how the Vatican has turned to being a tool of this, as I elucidated in my closing statement of the debate, when we look at Paulo Freire and Freire, and the other liberation theology socialists like Camorra, Archbishop Camorra, who were mentors and influences on both Klaus and Pope Francis. That will help us understand how this is coming to fruition, even post-Vatican II, even still. You guys both are I've not read Demons yet, so you guys know a lot more about that. And the thing that really fascinates me is the prophetic elements, not just in Demons, but also Grand Inquisitor chapter in Brothers Karamazov is very prophetic.
Yeah, it's definitely one of my favorite novels. I think the way that the characters are developed, the nihilists coming from the liberals, and also the way that the conspiracy that they get involved in works is historically accurate, hauntingly prophetic as well, as far as like what happens later on, 50 years after it was published in the Bolshevik Revolution.
Mark, there was something that I wanted to ask you that you highlighted in previous podcast, and that was the issue of the sort of prophetic nature of the utopia being built on millions of skulls. Could you comment on that he seemed to have this, Dostoevsky seemed to have this insight into what this revolution will bring about, 2 decades or so, 3 decades, I don't remember when it was written, but it was many.
Yeah, he wrote it in the 1871, okay. 72, somewhere okay. there, and and then the Russian Revolution, about 50 years later. So so that Dostoevsky was absolutely prophetic. That's what's so great about this novel, Demons, is that it's very multidimensional and multi-layered. So you have this organization of revolutionaries that it's very conspiratorial, but it's also they go into the theory of the revolution and the implementation of their utopia and how they're going, the praxis of of their ideology.
Yeah.
And it basically amounts to total freedom for the revolutionary elite. So around 10, like 1 out of 10, and then for the other 9 out of 10, complete slavery. They'll serve the elite, and they will be basically automatons in a kind of technocratic panopticon, more or less, where there's complete surveillance.
So does it actually get into like those technocratic themes?
A little bit.
Okay.
He talks about total surveillance.
Okay.
It's the technocracy in Demons is more implied.
Right.
By Shugalyov, the theoretician of the revolutionaries.
Well,
and by Verkhovinsky, the Pyotr Stepanovich, who is he's the revolutionary son, and he is just pure Machiavellian. Everything's based on expediency, and so it's kind of this demonic rationalism.
Yeah, there's explicit reference in Crime and Punishment to utilitarianism, and utilitarianism Bentham is who is involved in this idea of panopticon, and that's formative for technocracy. So I wouldn't be surprised if there weren't allusions to that.
Yeah.
Even in Notes from the Underground, he does mention the technocracy. He says we'll have like an algorithm that'll determine everybody's.
That's right.
Yeah, he says that there can be. He calls it a we can have a logarithmic calculation that will calculate to whatever 111,000 decimals, and everybody's whole life can be calculated before they even live it.
Right.
And that's in the first novel we talked about, Notes from the Underground.
Yeah, total planning, total control, and complete slavery for almost everyone besides this. And we got to keep in mind, like, Dostoevsky was writing at the same time as Nietzsche, so there's also the concept here of the Overman or the Übermensch, the Superman, who has total freedom, and that was also in Crime and Punishment.
It's big, yeah. That's big in Crime and Punishment.
Yeah, and he developed it further here in Demons. So and he's very explicit. He says, I think the number was like 10 million. He says 10 million heads.
It was 100 million. He said 100 million.
Yeah, it was 100 million. Yeah, 100 million heads. We will build our paradise.
Wow.
On these skulls, So, and lo and behold, there was, the 20th century was, full of this type of murder. So, yeah, it's pretty striking.
Now, is there any? I don't want to, make you guys feel like you have to stop talking about, Demons. If there's anything else that you find relevant, again, like I haven't read that one yet, so this is where you guys can really help me out here and fill us in. I mean, are there any explicit references to secret societies? I know that Tristan, you had kind of mentioned that the other day in your talk.
Yeah. I mean, it's like the whole thing is based around these circles and these groups of 5, which is all reflecting kind of the. I go in my last couple streams. I go through and kind of show the historical references that are implicit in the revolutionary model that's being employed by Pyotr and Stavrogan and these revolutionaries in the groups. So yeah, they openly are referencing the ideas of the group of 5, the circle, and the circles that are just a chain. He said at one point, he says, he implies to the other people in this group that you are part of this small group, and it's a part of a large chain, a long rope, and there are 1,000 knots in this rope going all throughout Europe and Russia, and we are going to bring about this great upheaval, and even
you had said one of the characters references the Jacobins, and so that would be a pretty direct connection to the real Illuminists.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's Babeuf, Weishaupt. I mean, these people, these historical revolutionaries, actually employed the same exact methods that are being demonstrated here, and they had the same worldview, right? Like what Mark was mentioning just a minute ago. He's talking about Shigoyevism, right? I was looking for the quote, but he, it says we're gonna. Mr. Shigoyev is all too seriously devoted to this task, and what's more, it's too modest. I know his book. He suggests, as a final solution to the question, the division of mankind into two unequal parts. 1/10 is granted freedom of person and unlimited rights over the remaining 9/10. These must lose their person and turn into something like a herd, and in unlimited obedience through a series of regenerations, attain to a primeval innocence, something like a primeval paradise. Though, by the way, they will have to work. The measures proposed by the author for removing the will of 9/10 of mankind and remaking them into a herd by means of a re-educating of entire generations are quite remarkable based on natural facts and extremely logical. One may disagree with certain conclusions, but it's difficult to doubt the author's intelligence and knowledge. So this is another character talking about Shigoyev's idea here. So yeah, 1/10 of you will have liberty, and 9/10 of you will have equality. Well, the 1/10 will also have
and slavery. Yeah.
Right.
So they're reconciling the revolutionary, the retard trinity of liberty, fraternity, and equality, which is this is empty slogans. But those empty slogans are really kind of diametrically opposed. The concept of liberty and fraternity. I'm sorry, liberty and equality. Just those two. Those can't exist together. If you have liberty, how can you have equality? Right, so that you will have 1/10 that will have liberty and rights over all the other 9/10, and they'll have equality as slaves in a herd, and they'll be re-educated over generations. He says.
Oh, really? So it's a generational re-education camp.
And he speaks specifically about that re-education. It's basically pushing degeneracy. Everyone informs on each other. Total surveillance and. Just just anti-intellectualism,
and also
total dysgenics.
And also destruction of the family. And he talks about, he's like, look, people aren't going to church. Look how much people are drinking. There's vodka everywhere. He's like, I saw a little girl swearing at her mother the other day. And he's like, I know it's bad. We'll stop it one day, but we need to accelerate this now. And then we're going to basically, we'll be the kings. He's like, and he even says, we'll get the Pope involved. The Pope will be down for it. The Pope he'll embrace this. And all the things.
You're saying the revolutionaries say that?
The revolutionary Piotr says, we'll get the Pope.
Wow.
Says, we'll
because that's
very interesting.
Well, that's what the Grand Inquisitor says.
World Economic Forum.
Yeah. And the Grand Inquisitor says that too. More or less.
Yeah. It's the same. It's the third temptation of Christ, where worldly power is offered. If you bow down to the rebel angel. Yeah, it's the same. Same dynamic.
And Jay, you mentioned like the idea, the conspiratorial circles and stuff. At one point, a character, the liberal father of Piotr. His name is Stepan Trofimovich, and he's basically he's like Jordan Peterson. He's he's very much like Jordan Peterson. He's this kind of bumbling liberal who's this great poet, professor, and he's always talking about how he's about to write something great, but he's never really written anything. And he just he's not a full-on nihilist. He's not the most liberal, but he's liberal enough where he wants to be perceived as liberal, and he's a great character.
Does he represent classical liberalism?
He very much embraces classical liberalism, and then actually he does have a great redemption arc. So, I do compare it to Jordan Peterson, but it's not in a denigrating way. Stepan Trofimovich ends up embracing Christ in the end, and is a beautiful character. Anyways, his house gets raided. He pisses some people off, and his house gets raided, and they take a bunch of his papers and pamphlets or whatever is in his house. And somebody comes and speaking to him and is like, look, are you a member of a secret society? And he's like, I don't know. he goes, I don't know. These days, how could you even tell? Like, so this idea of the secret society is all throughout the book. And then when one character is asked about it, he doesn't even know if he was ever initiated a secret society. He has to really think about it. So this kind of shows you how these things they permeate the world that they live in these liberal circles.
Yeah. And it's you love it, Jay, because it's highly conspiratorial. I mean, it's really cool. Like you have the character of Verkhovensky, Pyotr Stepanovich. He the leader of the revolutionary cell. He does stuff like he's in league with a bandit, a criminal that he uses to basically carry out attacks, and kind of like terror, like this criminal, his name is Fedya. He hires him to like burn down a church and desecrate icons, stuff like that, which just kind of reminds one of the ties between these types of revolutionary groups and intelligence services and organized crime. He also, the other crazy thing he does is that with the ideologue Kirillov, and Kirillov we got to discuss as well. Kirillov, and let's discuss just to make sure, because these are really cool things. But Kirillov, Stavrogin, and then right now we're talking about Verkhovinsky. But Verkhovinsky basically uses the ideologue Kirillov, who has this theory about basically killing oneself to kill God and to basically transfigure through death by killing one's own fear. But he uses Kirillov as an asset, and when the time comes, Kirillov takes blame for a murder that the cell had committed, and that's when that kind of kicks off once Kirillov does that and then commits suicide. That kicks off all the chaos, and that's kind of one of the signals to start the revolution. And there's even in
it's almost like a demonic version of sacrifice.
Yeah,
Yes.
he
because
agrees to kill himself. They make him agree to kill himself, but they're like, you have to. He wants to kill himself as this this ultimate act of nihilism, and you become God. Like if you are able to if you kill yourself, we all kill ourselves. We'll all become God, and we'll transcend. We'll transcend everything, and negate everything. It's this really weird, but kind of
it's like an inverse transfiguration.
Yeah, because sacrifice is going to play a big role in crime and punishment. Is why I'm asking. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, but he wants to kill himself, right? And they all know he wants to kill himself, and he's always talking about it, and he's always telling everybody how I'm trying to figure out why more people don't kill themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is his academic work he's writing a piece on why are more people not killing themselves.
Well, and the existentialists take a big they'll use that quite a bit because that becomes a big thing for.
But it's hilarious. Piotr tells him, well, yeah, you can kill yourself. That's your free will. But you have to do it when we want you to do it, right? So it's like this demonic hijacking of his ultimate act of free will. But yeah, you're free to do this. You can kill yourself, but when I say, and also I'm gonna help you write the suicide letter so that you are exonerating all of our criminal activity that we just engaged in. And
so I didn't know this. I mean, this sounds like Sartre, like just ripping this directly off, because I mean, a big part of some of the debates and discussions that Sartre has, I think he wrote one of these weird short stories. I think it's called The Wall, which is a pretty crazy short story that he did. And the whole point of that story is like, maybe you should just kill yourself, because like isn't that the real act of freedom? And it harkens to what you guys are talking about here.
Yeah, and Kirillov is a fascinating character, and it's really that's like some of the best dialogue in the book is his kind of him delving into this notion of overcoming his own fear of death. And he's trying, and he also wants to kill the idea of God that torments him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so and he can only do that by killing himself and then becoming a god. It's really nutty.
No, I mean Sartre says that very thing. I mean Sartre was like super blasphemous, and so I just didn't realize that like so much of what he was. I mean, he sounds like a character out of a Dostoevsky novel is what's kind of blown me away. But last question for you.
Speaking of like sacrifice, right? You mentioned like sacrifice and the demonic idea of sacrifice. That's throughout the novel as well, especially in the climax of the novel during the fire, right? And the symbol of the revolutionary fire, this kind of Promethean fire moving from the icon lamps, the icon stands, and into the houses and burning everything down to bring about this new order is like the climax of the novel in many respects. But then there is another scene where Piotr Pyotr Verkhovensky is talking to Stavrogin, and he's manic, and he's trying to get Stavrogin to kind of come back into this revolutionary movement. Stavrogin is a nihilist, but he's kind of like, man, you guys are nuts. He seems to not be.
Yeah, Stavrogin is above everything. He is like he's a Superman. He's an Antichrist figure.
Yeah.
But
He's too cool for the nihilist. He's like, man, you guys are fake and gay. Like, I'm not getting involved in your revolutionary movement anymore. I don't care about this. I'm even beyond this, right? And he's just into self-degradation, really. And Pyotr's trying to get him involved in this thing. He's telling him, look, I got all these people. I give them ranks, and this is how I keep them together, and I keep them bound together, and I control them through their through the passions and through flattery. He's telling him all the methods that he uses, which is just this demonic playbook, right? And then Stavrogin's like, man, you're giving me all these ways that you bind them together. Yeah, that's fine and all, but you know how you really bind people together in a circle? And they're talking about the group of 5, right? You get 4 members of the circle to knock off the 5th member under the pretext that he's an informant, and then you bind them all together with that blood, and you own them, and they're your slaves. So it basically tells them, human sacrifice is the real way that you're going to control these people. All the other stuff is just petty, essentially.
And that is carried out in the book, and it's like the atmosphere is that of an occult ritual. Yeah, it's dark.
I was about to ask if there's like that kind of a theme there, I mean, the circle of 5. I mean, this sounds like a magic circle, and the 5 points of the pentagram. I mean, it seems to. I mean, I don't know, but it sounds like that's what I think of when I hear that.
Yeah, but he doesn't get explicitly into the occult,
right.
But they do. He even references Dostoevsky references. Stavrogin gets accused by Shatov was another great character. He gets accused of. He says, is it true that you were involved in secret societies? Is it in occults like secret societies? Is it true that you were involved in degrading children? And basically says, what do you say? I think he says, were you involved in degrading children and involved in a secret society that were...
And also like orgies and stuff
yeah,
like that.
he said that would make the Marquis de Sade blush or something like that, right? So they reference kind of like the French secret.
Yeah. That there's reality to that in the sense that a lot of people don't realize that a lot of Marxist socialist revolutionaries were into straight up occultism and Satanism. I mean, Mark, you did that translation, I think, wasn't it, where you talked about some of the Bolshevik figures like Gleb Boki, Gleb Boki and they would do eyes wide shut parties, right?
Yeah, Gleb Boki, Barshenka, and then figures like Lunacharsky, high up in the Bolshevik hierarchy. Yeah, that's called the Bolsheviks' Occult War. You can find that on Espionage History Archive. I just want to say we should talk about Stavrogin too, because Stavrogin in Demons is this Antichrist figure, and even his name, it's Dostoevsky. The origin of his name is Stavros in Greek means cross, and then Raga in Russian are horns, so it's the horn cross. But Stavrogin is this he's a figure of enormous power and charm. Like he's tall and handsome, he's brilliant, but he's like he is the Nietzschean Übermensch, kind of incarnate, and he basically practices the transvaluation of all values, and at the very end of the novel, it's kind of interesting how Stavrogin, he atrophies because it shows the kind of the creative impotence of evil, that evil itself cannot create anything but only destroy. But Stavrogin there's a key thing that's important about the book Demons, and I encourage everyone to find it. Should be available online. There's a missing chapter from Demons, and it's called I think it's in English it's called at Tikhon's, and that's really important to read. At Tikhon's or Stavrogin's Confession, and I think it was translated by Virginia Woolf back in the day. Like
you should read it in sequence where it's supposed to be in the book as well, because there's a specific part where it's supposed to be in the version I had, Mark. It has it in there. This is the Heavier translation. this one by Heavy
Yeah,
R.
Wolochonsky. Yeah. Okay, that's perfect. Yeah, and I'm glad it's in there. That chapter at Tikhon's is really important because that kind of goes into elite deviance and at the same time, so it kind of examines that from a conspiratorial angle to some extent of, Stavrogin basically sex Yuli hurting this prepubescent girl because he wants to, just because that's what he wills, and he decided, that's just that was the force of his self-will. He decided to do that, and that girl then later committed suicide. She hung herself.
Now, last, I think we should touch on Grand Inquisitor because it's probably the most famous sort of cut out of the novel chapter where you have the papal inquisitor who is doing his inquisiting of Christ himself. And what's amazing about that section is that this chapter is prophetic because it's almost like it's charted the course of the Roman Catholic Church, especially with the rise of the papacy in the second millennium of Christianity. And you basically have the papacy telling Christ, more or less, that we don't need you anymore. We've basically established this kind of earthly kingdom, the Roman Catholic Church. It will provide mankind with the three temptations of Christ, that although Christ might have been a figure who opposed those temptations, we will give man the bread that he desires. We will give man the things that he desires in this life. And so whatever Christianity was or represented is not necessary. And that's very closely connected to the revolutionary promise and ethos, because revolutionaries, especially the communist Marxist ethos, it comes out of, even historically, scholars will admit this, Joachim of Fior, the late medieval movements that were, communal. Thomas Munzer was a late medieval communist, sectarian. I mean, most historians will chart the rise of Illuminism, Marxism, and so forth from those medieval predecessors, and those represented rejections of orthodoxy. And so what you get is communism seems to be the result of deviations of Orthodox Christianity, because what happens is that people they lose the supernatural, and then they want to instantiate into the temporal whatever the ideals of Christianity were. They make it a purely historical thing, and it becomes a political movement, because when you leave the theology out, when you leave the redemptive aspect of the theology, it ends up being this here and now political movement, and that's what leads to so much of the disaster. And so we can see both the critique, I think, of the communist ethos in the Grand Inquisitor, as well as a prophetic critique of, in my view, the decline of the papacy. And boy, is the Grand Inquisitor chapter prophetic nowadays, post-Vatican II, especially with somebody like Francis. I mean, it's almost like prophecy, in my view.